Donald Trump, he doesn't figure anywhere. But there are people who are privy to the subject who claim that Donald Trump has been actually referred to number of times in most sensitive issues, which may undermine his current claim. So these kind of things are very, very extremely sensitive. Therefore, I would give it a pass to the media and the investigative agency. Let them come out with facts and figures, and then it will go ahead. But the point that you're trying to make, it may become a turning point in the history of America if it has got anything worthwhile, which is showing the political dispensation of the leadership in a compromising situation. That is the actually the turning point which one has to be wary of. If that happens, well, the Republicans or Democrats, either way, it will be a very serious setback to the political dispensation in the leadership of United States of America, more so being a superpower of the world order. Back to you, Thomas.
Indeed, and of course the release of these files, which were supposed to be released in mid-December of last year, has been controversial. That deadline was not met, and only a tiny fraction of files were released then. We now, of course, have many more, which I'm sure we're going to get trickles in of updates through that as officials go through those files that have been released today as the day goes on. However, it's been controversial, to say, that's the minimum that we can say. Do you think the DOJ here is pursuing maximum transparency as the law that was passed by Congress said it had to, or is it maximum damage control when it comes to this case?
There are multiple parts in your question. First part is I totally agree with you. It's highly, I mean, you have been very modest and restrained in your expression or the language used. It's a very controversial issue. And secondly, about the openness or the transparency. You are spot on. There is no doubt that it lacks total, utter transparency and the accountability. I'm glad that they've made a law, and that's how things are coming out in tricklets and incremental manner. Had it not happened, perhaps the people who are responsible, they would have been having a field day, and this would have become a way of life in USA. So therefore, to say that the transparency is in somewhat it is coming to light, it is being practiced, but I would endorse your point of view in your question that USA has got much more to do to ensure transparency in this case because it reflects the character of not the individual but the nation. What does the nation, the leadership want, the people of America to follow and comply with? The culture. The culture is going to get vitiated if they do not actually come out openly and ensure transparency in the entire thing. At the moment, to reflect my thoughts in response to your question, I would say it is lacking transparency and accountability. There is a lot of hidden files which are yet to be disclosed or brought to the public notice. Back to you, Thomas.
Indeed, and of course, going back to that first release of Epstein files, we saw a controversial move where one photo of Donald Trump was indeed included in there and then suddenly disappeared. The DOJ then apologized, reinstated it, and of course another hugely controversial thing is the amount of redactions that have gone on. What is not supposed to be redacted is political embarrassment, reputational harm to public figures, or mere association or social contact with Epstein, or the names of powerful people unless tied to a legally protected category. What is supposed to be redacted, of course, is the identification of those victims, which is what we have indeed seen. Donald Trump, this has been a mess when it comes to these released. Of course, the deadline hasn't been reached. We are getting files and files of blacked out pages. We're also, as we saw in that first release, got a image of Donald Trump taken back by the DOJ and then reinstated once the public had noticed it. What does this say about the way that the U.S. administration has handled this, and of course the American public's quench for further transparency?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, Thomas. You made a very strong point. Firstly, the way the American administration has handled the thing, there is far from what was being desired or what is actually desired in the society. They are way off the mark nearest to the average mark of transparency, accountability, and some kind of, I would say, the rule of law. Such a thing, I have already reflected earlier that it reflects very poor, inferior quality of character of the nation. And they're trying to hide something which may actually collapse the nation as a superpower. They may become a third world or developing country very soon. They may have military might and the economic might, but coming to the very core value of the human society is going to be totally bankrupt. So, under these circumstances, I don't think, in my opinion, that the American government has handled the Epstein file efficiently in an accountable and in a professional manner. They have lacked self accountability, and I would say they have lacked the very deficiency of the core value of a human being part of this society, progressive and forward looking society of a developed nation. And therefore, I would say that the country would do well if Donald Trump takes it seriously himself. He needs to introspect because no matter what the society or the country or the world says, it is he who has to answer that if he was involved in the slightest of some kind of an involvement which would actually indicate compromising the personality of a political leader in such a status. I think, in my opinion, he should put up his papers and apply for resignation. Back to you, Thomas.
Okay, Major General G, do stay with us as we move on to our next story. We stay in the United States for it, and protesters across the US gathered for a nationwide strike against US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, otherwise known as ICE, and President Donald Trump's immigration policies. In Denver, demonstrators danced and rallied in protest, while thousands took to the streets in Minneapolis following the fatal shootings of 2 US citizens by federal agents. The protests were part of a national shutdown calling for the withdrawal of immigration agents from the state. In other cities like California and New York, students and teachers joined the strike. And according to sources, ICE has expanded the power of its agents to arrest individuals without warrants. The protests and new ICE measures have fueled nationwide outrage over the ongoing immigration crackdown. Let's listen into what some of the protesters had to say.
I'm here because I'm an artist and symbols are really important to me. And the symbol of the Statue of Liberty has always been my favorite symbol of America. And what's going on right now with ICE in our city is not who we are. The Liberty's statue is a symbol of light and welcoming to immigrants and opportunity. And going door to door and hunting down people and coming in the night with masks on is not who we are. And this has got...
We'll be known as the city that stood up for freedom. We're all together. We love each other. That's why I'm here. It's because I love my city, I love my country, and I love my neighbors.
We need to abolish ICE. We need to take back our constitutional rights, our First Amendment, our Second Amendment, all our Fourth Amendment, all our amendments, and we have to impeach everyone from the top down until we have an actual democracy. And I don't know what that looks like yet. I don't think anybody does. But we're waiting for it, we're pushing for it, and we're marching for it.
Dr. Satoru Nagao joins us now. He's a fellow at the Hudson Institute and he joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Dr. Nagao, for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you. Of course, these protests have been ongoing for weeks now, and they've now spread nationwide, even worldwide, in some circumstances. How badly do these nationwide protests damage the United States' credibility when it lectures other countries about civil rights and liberties? Of course, you can cite Iran as an example, and these protests now have seen 2 people killed.
In this case, we need to remember that this is cracking down towards illegal immigrants. So legal or illegal is very important matter even if immigration is legal in the country. So that's why this is controversial. The cracking down the illegal immigrant creates a problem because of the low quality of the work of the ICE. Because when we check the video, what happened in Minnesota is the ICE agent killed the victim after they took the gun. So this means that this is not follow the protocol. The breach protocol is happening, really happening. So that's why what kind of training they receive, what kind of the protocol they learn is the matter. So quality of the agent is indeed very bad. So that's why how to cracking down the ICE itself is a problem. The cracking down itself is a political matter, which, of course, right versus left can fight. But what really happened in that place is indeed the quality of the work of the ICE agent is the matter. Despite this, this is quite a political issue because the background of this cracking down is quite political. Right-wing, the Republican side supports cracking down the illegal immigrant, but the left-wing, the Democrat side do not like this because even if the illegal immigrants, they support the U.S. economy. So that's why as a reality, the U.S. needs these immigrants. So that's why the two are fighting each other and the battle. And so this is a political issue. Decision should make through the election or other things, discussion in the democratic country. And the current government is Republican. This means that cracking down is the decision the U.S. voter choose. So quality of the work is one thing, but political battle is another thing. So we should divide these two in this case, I think.
Dr. Nagal, do stay with us as we move on and we head to Latin America for our next story. And Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, has announced a proposed general amnesty law for political prisoners, aiming to address decades of political violence. Rodriguez has also stated that the law could lead to the release of hundreds of political prisoners, covering cases of political violence from 1999 to the present. However, rights groups have said that about 711 political detainees remain in custody, while the government claims hundreds have already been freed. In a related move, she confirmed the notorious El Helicoide prison in Caracas would be repurposed for social services and sport. Let's take a listen in.
Quiero anunciar que hemos decidido impulsar una ley de amnistía general que cubra todo el periodo político de violencia política de 1999 al presente. Y encargo que sea una ley que sirva para reparar las heridas que ha dejado la confrontación política, desde la violencia, desde el extremismo, que sirva para reencauzar la justicia en nuestro país y que sirva para reencauzar la convivencia entre los venezolanos y las venezolanas. Quedarán exceptuados de esta ley, tal como lo contempla nuestra Constitución, aquellos procesados o condenados por homicidio, por tráfico de drogas, por corrupción y por violaciones graves a los derechos humanos. Pido entonces...
Furthermore, Rodriguez also called for a new justice system to replace the current one, widely criticized for corruption and alignment with the Chavista regime. Let's take a listen in.
He decidido convocar a una gran consulta nacional por un nuevo sistema de justicia y pido la colaboración de todos. Esta tarea estará en manos igualmente de la Comisión de la Revolución por la Justicia que preside el vicepresidente sectorial Diosdado Cabello y por el Programa de Convivencia Democrática y para la Paz. Justicia, pido también medidas alternativas al castigo y a la punición para nuestros privados de libertad en el marco de una categorización de los delitos.
Joining us now is Major General Sudhakar G, a senior strategic and international affairs expert, joining us once again. Of course, we're now reaching nearly a month since Nicolas Maduro, the toppled president of Venezuela, was captured by United States forces and taken over to New York City to face a courtroom. However, we've seen strange developments when it comes to the government. Delcy Rodriguez, his former vice president, has now taken that role as interim leader. And we've seen her in some ways appease the US government in conducting some actions, these being one of them, the release of political prisoners. And now we're seeing her shut down this notorious prison inside the Venezuelan capital, which was notorious for torture, among other human rights abuses. Do you think this is a sign of genuine reconciliation or simply a rebranding of authoritarian rule?
Thomas, thank you for getting me back to your show. We need to understand the origin of Venezuela right since Spanish time till date. And the leftist regime came in a big way in 98 when Chavez became the president. After his death, Maduro. And we know what Maduro has gone through, how he's been subjected to sanction and lots of restrictions. In a way, he perhaps is one living example. Despite all kinds of international sanctions, he still became the president based on an election, no matter it might have been corrupted or subjected to a lot of infiltration and malpractices. But the issue remains that there is a way of life which every Venezuelan is used to. There is a way of life. I am actually surprised. Yesterday only I was giving a talk to some international audience. It came out that at one point in time they had 130,000% of the inflation, hyperinflation. So the people, no means am I saying that there is depravity or there is any kind of this thing. They have got debt to GDP ratio is very high. The way of life, living standards are very costly. But at the same time, I personally feel that it has become the kind of a sanctuary of forces which are little away from the democratic norms. This liberal practice is at the moment which Vice President has actually done as per the demands of the America. It is just a temporary measure simply to toe the line. And my assessment, my gut feeling is that Venezuela will bounce back to its erstwhile practice unless they have some meaningful, substantive political leadership who are statesmen-like, who can steer the nation ahead. And for that, it requires sustained America support. And if America doesn't extend support the way they have assured now, then in foreseeable future, things will actually fall flat. They will go back to same kind of a governance which is misruled, mismanaged, full of corruption, etc., etc. This is my take. Back to you, Thomas.
And of course, that relationship between Donald Trump and Delcy Rodriguez, it seemed, of course, that the United States was going to be a lot more aggressive when it comes to taking control of Venezuela. However, we haven't seen that, at least not at this stage. How would you assess the way in which the United States has gone about things? Of course, it's made a statement that it's going to control the country along with its oil reserves. It's had those meetings with those US oil leaders, but no visible steps in how it's going to move forward in running the country, as Donald Trump says.
You see, first and foremost, I must clarify, in my opinion, whatever America has done against Venezuela on 3rd of January and thereafter, it's not a thing which is to be accepted by the rule of law or by the rules-based international order, because this sets a very wrong precedent. But having done that, you see, the current political dispensation in USA has come under excessive pressure. Not only Venezuela, it's ICE, it is the Epstein file, it is the tariff, and the hearing from Supreme Court is still awaited. handling of immigrants, the price rise taking place despite the claim that economy is improving. I feel that America is heading for recession if it is not handled effectively. So such, and the political science of, I used to talk to people, use of phraseology called as, political civil war. America, whether you accept or not, Thomas, America is going through a political civil war as far as the present state is concerned. What I mean by this phraseology is that within Republican Party, you will have Republicans fighting against the Republicans. Within Democrats, you will have Democrats fighting against the Democrats. And there is also intra and inter. That is, Democrats and Republic will try to bring down each other. Why am I highlighting this point is, very soon there are 25 vacancies, seats which are falling vacant in Senate. Out of that, if I respect my memory, around 9 are Democrats and the rest are Republicans. There are some figures. Now, going by the present trend of popularity of the Republicans, I fear that like in previous couple of months, some of the provinces had gone to election. The Democrats have bounced back with thumping majority. Similar thing may happen. So there is a pressure building up on Donald Trump. Because of this pressure, they are not able to extend the kind of activities and the activity matrix which they are supposed to undertake. It is good that America soft pedals, slows it down. Otherwise, they are creating tremors world over. If they go too much into the country's administration, the big question of sovereignty and the territorial integrity of an independent country will be raised not by only Venezuelans, but the world over. Back to you, Thomas.
Major General G, as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us and taking the time. We stay in Latin America for our next story, and a fire has broken out at Ecuador's largest oil refinery in Esmeraldas, prompting the activation of emergency protocols according to state oil company Petroecuador. Petroecuador confirmed on X that the fire occurred in a slop pool located in an external area of the refinery, and firefighting teams responded immediately under the facility's contingency plan. The company stated that the incident remained under control, no injuries were reported, and refinery operations continued normally with production of petroleum derivatives proceeding as scheduled. Petroecuador indicated that the causes of the fire were under technical evaluation following industrial safety and risk management protocols. Now, the world of film and television is mourning the loss of Catherine O'Hara. The two-time Emmy-winning actor has died at the age of 71. Her manager says O'Hara passed away at her Los Angeles home after a brief illness. Her career spanned 5 decades, from Canada's Second City Television to Hollywood classics like Beetlejuice, Best in Show and the Home Alone films. She became a global favourite again with her Emmy-winning role as Myra Rose in Schitt's Creek, marking a remarkable late career renaissance. O'Hara also appeared in recent projects including The Last of Us and The Studio. The Walt Disney Company is preparing for a major leadership change. CEO Bob Iger has told associates he plans to step down and pull back from daily management before his contract ends on December the 31st. Disney's board is set to meet next week in Burbank to vote on a successor. Iger has said he wants to give the next leader a fresh start and avoid repeating the turmoil that followed his first exit in 2020. The shortlist has narrowed to 2 internal contenders: Experiences Chief Josh D'Amaro and Entertainment Co-Chair Dana Walton, with prediction markets strongly favouring D'Amaro. Iger is expected to remain for several months after the announcement to ensure a smooth transition. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, And India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. The US Justice Department releases 3 million pages, 180,000 images and 2,000 videos linked to Jeffrey Epstein. The release comes after a missed legal deadline, with officials saying it ends a major review to ensure transparency. The US enters partial government shutdown. The US government enters a partial government shutdown after Congress fails to pass a 2026 budget. Lawmakers signal a quick fix as the White House moves to ratify a Senate-backed deal next week. The US Chief of Mission for Venezuela is set to arrive in Caracas as the government proposes a broad amnesty law. Acting President Delcy Rodriguez says the bill could free hundreds of political detainees and transform a notorious prison. Iran says it is ready for fair and equitable talks with the United States as regional tensions continue to rise. President Trump refuses to rule out military action, while Tehran says negotiations cannot occur under threats. Washington approves $6.67 billion in arms sales to Israel amid a fragile Gaza ceasefire. The package includes 30 Apache helicopters and infantry assault vehicles, according to the State Department. More than 200 people are killed in a collapse at the Rabaya coltan mine in eastern DRC. The site produces about 15% of the world's coltan and has been under M23 rebel control since 2024. The United Nations warns it could run out of money by July as member states fail to pay their fees. The warning comes after the US withholds funding and other countries fall into arrears. China conducts naval and air patrols around Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. The feature is claimed by Beijing but lies within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. A draft indictment that was never brought against Jeffrey Epstein reveals allegations of a conspiracy to procure girls under the age of 18 between the years of 2001 and 2005. The indictment claimed Epstein and 3 unnamed co-conspirators brought girls to his Palm Beach home, where they were paid to engage in inappropriate activities. The document also alleges threats were made to the girls if they reported the abuse. Instead of moving forward with the indictment, prosecutors reached a controversial non-prosecution agreement in 2007, which allowed Epstein to serve just 13 months in state prison on related charges. The Justice Department later criticized the deal but did not find misconduct. Meanwhile, video footage released as part of the latest disclosure shows Ghislaine Maxwell answering questions about her former partner, Epstein. While asked about whether Epstein had a scheme to recruit underage girls for massages, she answers that she knows about no such scheme. Joining us now is Andrew K.P. Leung to discuss this. He's a China strategist and he joins us live from Hong Kong. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Of course, this ongoing saga continues with now the latest but final batch in the Justice Department's efforts of releasing the so-called Epstein files under the Epstein Transparency Act, which was passed last year. How would you assess the Department of Justice's handling in these documents, and what are your thoughts on what's coming out of them?
Well, let's face it, there are a number of important questions or important facts for people to grasp, especially those outside the United States, as to what this is all about. The so-called Epstein or Epstein files, in fact, surround this very important, powerful figure. And then he was caught presiding over almost a young girls' prostitution empire that count his clients amongst the most, the richest and the most powerful people across the aisle in the United States and even beyond, including some in even in Britain. Now, this Epstein guy died, was caught and was charged, but he died suddenly in prison. in 2019. Over half of the, something like half of the population in the United States believe that he didn't die just by committing suicide, suggesting there are a lot of things under the carpet. But since he died, the charges against him under U.S. law were dropped. But why this continuing release of the files? This is because there is a conspiracy charge which would, of course, touch upon his vast estate, because the Epstein guy was quite rich, and then the estate could be seized to compensate victims. The second thing is that, well, apart from the estate, why there are such a movement towards this release? Because it touched upon the richest and the powerful. Obviously, since there were circumstances surrounding his death, the same kind of forces would stop his release. But why are there such a momentum towards releasing something like 3 million pages? This is because I think that because they engulf so many figures, riches and powerful, including those in the financial world. And then you touch on both sides of the aisle as the midterm elections are coming up. Both camps think that by releasing those the dossier, it could hurt the supporters of his opponents. But then, as I said, I mean, the case is so widespread, and it touches on both sides of the camp. But both sides of the camp, either side, would try to release these pages so as to damage the reputation of the other side. And of course, President Trump has redacted certain pages which could implicate himself. So I think that this is what this saga is all about.
Okay, Andrew, do stay with us as we move on to our next story. Of course, we are expecting further updates coming out of those Epstein files as experts and analysts continue to dig through them, but we'll continue to bring you those on this programme. But we now move on. And the UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is in China. He's met with Shanghai Party Secretary Chen Jin-ning today, the city's top official, to discuss expanding business ties. This marks the first trip to China by a British Prime Minister in 8 years. And Starmer's visit comes as Western leaders seek to strengthen relations with China amid tensions with the United States. The UK is emphasising trade and economic opportunities while navigating a complex global landscape. Let's listen in to what the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, had to say on the issue.
I'm travelling with a large delegation of some of the top and best businesses in the United Kingdom, some of our best cultural organisations and institutions in art, in museums, in sport, and so much more travelling with us. And that signals just how important a moment we in the UK see this reset relationship with China.
Andrew KP Leung joins us once again. Andrew, what does Keir Starmer's decision to visit China after a British Prime Minister hasn't done so in 8 years signal about Britain's evolving strategy of relative diplomatic distance?
Well, of course, this has been sparked off by President Trump's unilateralism and belittling his long-standing allies, including the United Kingdom, which is almost a cast iron relationship with the United States for a long, long time. But now this relationship is largely broken. Not that the United Kingdom would try to antagonize the United States, but then because the trust has proven to be less trustful than before, and then of course even though the United States market remains to be the UK's largest market, but because of Trump's unilateral tariffs and other restrictions, and as I said, belittling this long-standing relationship. So Starmer is trying to recalibrate the relationship across the world, not just China. For example, other countries are doing the same, including the European Union, which has just signed a historic free trade agreement with India, and also Canada. The Prime Minister's visiting China, and the whole parade of Western leaders, including France, Germany, and Finland, all visiting China, sort of and making a beeline for Beijing. This suggests that the whole world, so-called rule-based order, has been seen to be replaced by the rules of the jungle. And of course, with the rules of the jungle, the relatively less powerful is going to seek other avenues to preserve their own sovereignty and to preserve their business opportunities and also the development opportunities.
Yes, and does this suggest that the start of a broader Western collaboration towards China? Of course, we've seen the likes of Canada, we've seen Ireland, France, we've got Chancellor Frederick Merz visiting Beijing next month. Does this signal something larger?
Yes, I think that this is almost a paradigm shift. You can say that even a historic turning point, because since the Second World War, end of the Second World War, the whole world was or has been relatively maintained in a stable and mutually beneficial kind of environment in terms of international relations, with commonly accepted norms led by the United States, even though those norms are loaded in favor of American interests. But of course, the United States still care about those norms and is seen to be the leader of a fair and just world. But now this trust is totally broken and it's been jettisoned by President Trump himself. He believes that might is right, and he maximizes Americans' dominance in the military by abducting a leader of the next door neighbor in South America, Venezuela, and by threatening to annex Greenland, belong to Denmark, which of course is a traditional ally with the West, and is part of very important part of NATO. So I think that all these suggest that the United States under Trump doesn't believe in the so-called rule-based order anymore, and it believes that Americans' dominance could serve Americans' best interests. And because of the total disruption of the world order, countries, especially the Western advanced countries, American allies, are now recalibrating a relationship with, of course, China is the world's largest, second largest economy, but also in other countries like India and other continents as well. So this is only to be expected, but it is a game changer.
Andrew K.P. Leung, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us. It's always a pleasure to speak to you here on the broadcast. We now move on, and Mexico is facing growing pressure after US President Donald Trump threatened to impose tariffs on countries, including Mexico, that send oil to Cuba. In response, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum warned that such measures could trigger a serious humanitarian crisis in Cuba, affecting hospitals, food supply, and other key services. Sheinbaum emphasized that while Mexico's oil shipments represent less than 1% of the country's production, the government is looking for diplomatic solutions and alternatives to help Cuba. Mexico, a vital oil supplier to Havana, could suffer significant repercussions if it continues to send oil, as Trump's tariffs loom large over future trade relations. Let's listen into what the Mexican president had to say.
Dos, la aplicación de aranceles a países que suministran petróleo a Cuba podría desencadenar una crisis humanitaria de gran alcance, afectando directamente hospitales, alimentación y otros servicios básicos del pueblo cubano.
Professor Rohan Gunaratne joins us now. He's an international affairs expert joining us live from Singapore. Professor Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure. What's Donald Trump aiming to achieve here by imposing tariffs or threatening to impose tariffs on countries that send oil to Cuba, even if they are close and traditional allies like that of Mexico?
President Trump is determined to ensure that the US will dominate the Western Hemisphere. He doesn't want any country that is within reach of that hemisphere to have any alliances. So Cuba is politically not with the United States. And that is one of the principal reasons he has taken this stand. This position of Trump will continue because this is a part of his mindset, his thinking of, firstly for him, America first, and then of course the Western Hemisphere.
And Professor Gunaratne, warnings of a humanitarian crisis were expressed by Scheinbaum. Of course, Cuba, a country in extreme economic hardship, causes it suffers frequent blackouts, among other issues. How credible is that risk, and how dependent is Cuba on Mexican oil?
Cuba certainly is a country in crisis. There is a very strong humanitarian dimension that needs to be addressed. But when it comes to President Trump, human rights and the rights of minorities, it really doesn't count. So his thinking is very different from the previous US administrations that we have seen. But this is the very beginning of leaders who will first think of their interests and govern accordingly rather than looking at humanitarian issues globally.
And of course, the United States has one of the longest trade embargoes with Cuba in relation to the world. It's one of the longest trade embargoes in history. However, do you think this administration marks a more hardline US approach towards Havana compared with recent presidents?
We have seen that some American presidents have even wanted to improve their relationship with Cuba. But in the case of Trump, he always believes peace through strength. So this may be also his way of eventually bringing Cuba under his influence. He believes that he must demonstrate strength in order to get people to follow him rather than be a threat to him.
Professor Gunaratne, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time. It's always great to speak to you on these issues. We now move on over to the United States once again, and the US State Department orders non-emergency employees to leave Niger due to safety risks following an attack on the Niamey airport claimed by ISIS. The department warned US citizens against traveling to Niger, citing increased dangers from terrorism, civil unrest and kidnapping. Government employees are instructed to use armoured vehicles and follow a curfew. Niger faces rising insecurity from terrorist groups like Janim and ISIS, with persistent attacks and civilian casualties. This comes after a coordinated assault on Niamey Airport and a nearby military base where militants targeted planes and facilities, further escalating the region's instability. We turn over to the Indian subcontinent now, and an ally of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, lawmaker LSK Devarayalu, has proposed a bill to ban social media for children under 16. Devarayalu argued that social media addiction is damaging the youth in India, which is one of the world's largest data producers for foreign platforms. The bill would require social media companies to verify users' ages and disable accounts for those under 16. This proposal follows similar moves in countries like Australia, France and the UK, where age-based restrictions are being considered. However, the bill is not government-backed but could influence future legislation on digital regulations. India's rapidly growing digital market is becoming a significant focus of global discussions on online safety. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. The US Justice Department releases 3 million pages, 180,000 images and 2,000 videos linked to sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The release comes after a missed legal deadline, with officials saying it ends a major review to ensure transparency. The US government enters a partial shutdown after Congress fails to pass a 2026 budget. Lawmakers signal a quick fix as the House moves to ratify a Senate-backed deal next week. The US chief of mission for Venezuela is set to arrive in Caracas as the government proposes a broad amnesty law. Acting President Delcy Rodriguez says the bill could free hundreds of political detainees and transform a notorious prison. Iran says it is ready for fair and equitable talks with the United States as regional tensions continue to rise. President Donald Trump refuses to rule out military action, while Tehran says negotiations could not occur under threats. Washington approves a $6.67 billion in arms sales to Israel amid a fragile Gaza ceasefire. The package includes 30 Apache attack helicopters and infantry assault vehicles, according to the State Department. More than 200 people are killed in a collapse at the Rabaya Coltan mine in eastern DRC. The site produces about 15% of the world's coltan and has been under M23 rebel control since 2024. The United Nations warns it could run out of money by July as member states fail to pay their fees. The warning comes after the United States withholds funding and other countries fall into arrears. China conducts naval and air patrols around the Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. The feature is claimed by Beijing but lies within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. Newly released documents from the Department of Justice show Howard Lutnick, currently serving as Trump's Secretary of Commerce, arranged to visit Jeffrey Epstein's island in 2012. According to emails, Lutnick was in contact with Epstein's assistant, who advised that Epstein wanted to meet with him during his trip to the Caribbean. Lutnick, along with his family and friends, were in the area during the holidays, and communications suggest a meeting took place. Lutnick has denied spending time with Epstein, claiming he hadn't seen the latest Epstein documents. Latest files also show that Lutnick and Jeffrey Epstein corresponded through intermediaries several times in 2011 and 2012, years after Lutnick had vowed to never be in the same room with Epstein again. Meanwhile, the files have also showed that Elon Musk apparently corresponded with Epstein in 2012 and 2013 as they discussed meeting at the late convicted sex offender's private island and at Musk's SpaceX facility in Southern California. Joining us now is Major General Sudhakar G, a senior strategic and international affairs expert, joining us live from Jaipur. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, it's always a pleasure. Musk and Lutnick, two people very close to Donald Trump. We've seen other officials in Donald Trump's orbit, including the likes of Peter Mandelson, the former UK ambassador to America, all named in these files and all seemingly having some sort of correspondence with either Epstein directly or with his associates. How will this affect trust going forward in the Trump administration as these files continue to be sifted through?
It's total nosediving. We sat in the morning, Thomas, very unfortunate to hear all these names coming up again with very substantive kind of signature and input pointing towards their deep involvement in the entire nefarious activities of Epstein. This must be gone into very seriously. Now, I personally feel that maybe earlier I had a very sympathetic and empathetic response to all the cases, but now day by day, hour after hour, new names are propping up. Looks like the whole world order is deeply immersed in such kind of activities. This has to be focused and given due focus and attention by the American authorities. I don't think we should gloss it over or ignore it to a low priority task. Must be taken forward in a professional investigative manner, and accountability must be ensured because big names are coming. Then I think America needs to actually shake itself up, otherwise it's heading for something very, very dangerous. Back to you, Thomas.
Accountability, of course, is the question. We seem to just be getting straight up denials from all these officials about involvement, and we heard from Lutnick, for example, who denied a meeting or communication within a certain time frame, and then it was disproved once again when more of these files came out. Of course, the same thing has happened to Donald Trump himself with previous releases. How will accountability be given moving forward? Do we expect the Trump administration or those in power to be asked more about it, to be debunked furthermore? Any responsibility to be taken here? Further explanation? Are there any checks and balances that can be put forward that will give Lutnick and others to provide explanation about these communications, which have now been proved?
Good question. A very sharp and brilliant question you have asked. America is the oldest democracy. It has got the oldest constitution based on which the country is running, and it's a time-tested one. Many of its articles have been subjected to revisits by relevant authorities, and I personally feel that it's a good question. There are no quick answers because the America being what it is going through today, it doesn't have a quick solution. I personally feel the people of America have to come onto the street. They have to galvanize. They have to speak in one voice. What kind of future for the America do they expect? Do they expect these kind of things? Do they expect ice killing? Do they expect tariff to be imposed and the inflation to be taken, the brunt of inflation to be taken by the customers? Do they expect the backyard Maduro, no matter what the reason is to be president and his wife to be picked up at the middle of the night? Is this the new rule of law? So the people of America are the strength and the weaknesses. If they accept what is coming forward, well, I have nothing to say. It is their country, it is their constitution, it is their leader. They have elected Donald Trump. I think it's about time they have to demand for a very, very apolitical, neutral kind of organization or establishment which must, go deeper into each of the issues, totally apolitical, without any prejudice or any kind of biases to any government. Selection of nomination of the people will require a great deal of scrutiny by people who enjoy the status of some kind of a neutrality. They have proven credentials in the past. Those are the people who must be given this job. They must be assigned the task of investigation and coming to the fine conclusion as to whether a person was actually involved or it is subject to, being dismissed by the accused, as is being done now. Back to you, Thomas.
Of course, there's been flip-flapping when it comes to this issue. Donald Trump's constant efforts to push this story out of the headlines have not been successful. The singular, one could say, issue where that has occurred. And now, of course, we're seeing further and further names in his administration and in his orbit, which are being put forward. In terms of taking accountability from the press, what are your thoughts in the way that the media haven't been briefed on this situation in particular? There has been no press conference where all of those named have been gathered into one room and have been questioned by the press. Do you think that Donald Trump, if he does this, would that there would be more confidence in the American people behind this act?
Yes, possibly. Yes, you have a point. I tend to agree with you. But unfortunately, you know the reality. That part of the Western Hemisphere is known to you. The fact remains that today the American pillars of democracy, they are being driven by invisible deep state. You just took the name of media. Unfortunately, I must call it out in a very subtle manner as far as possible. Talk about the judiciary. You see the composition of the Supreme Court. How many are the sponsor or the linkages they have with the Republicans? Donald Trump himself, he has nominated or he has sponsored those. Out of 9 benches, I think 6 of them, they belong to Republican affiliated judiciary representative. Similarly, the media is also deeply penetrated and is being driven by or controlled by more